Hello, boils and ghouls. You are now tuned in to PVD Horror Podcast. Pleasant screams.
Hey, what's going on? You're now tuned in to the PVD Horror Podcast. I'm Brandon, and today I'm joined by multi-award-winning film director, screenwriter, and showrunner Justin Harding to talk about his new film, Carved, which is now streaming on Hulu. Justin, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Now, Justin, you have a passion for creating unique monsters and love to tell stories that scare people and bring their nightmares to life. What inspired you to become a horror filmmaker?
I was always a filmmaker ever since I was a teenager. I started very young in high school making movies, and early on they were much more sort of like gangster movies and very violent, sort of almost Quentin Tarantino wannabe style movies.
Okay.
My mom used to watch horror movies. She was obsessed with the genre when I was very young, and when I was really young, she showed me the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, which absolutely sort of ruined horror movies for me for a while because I was so scared of it. But she was the one that would watch horror movies all the time. Mm-hmm. And one day she asked me, because I was working on television, directing comedy, doing a lot of TV, and she, many years ago, she got very sick, and she said, I really want to make a horror movie as a producer. I want to create something that's very scary. Can you make a movie that I'm the producer of? And I thought, okay, it's interesting. And I ended up making this short film called Point of View that was designed to be scary. It was my first time ever making something that was supposed to be scary. Mm-hmm. And Point of View ended up being very scary. And we got into a whole bunch of film festivals with it. And it ended up being purchased by an anthology and became part of a bigger film, a feature film called A Night of Horror. But that was my first attempt at making something that was scary, and it was because it was something my family, my mom was really into.
Okay,
that's how I started getting into it, and then from there I realized that the genre is super fun, and started to make a whole bunch of movies, in the genre.
Oh, that's a cool story that you shared. I had no idea, but I did read that you were a big fan of Nightmare on Elm Street. We always have these conversations about the franchise, but I'm very curious. If you had the opportunity, who would you cast as Freddy Krueger?
Oh, you know what? You can't cast anybody except for Robert Englund. They tried that, and it's at this point. I know he said that he doesn't want to do anymore, but at this point, I would cast Robert Englund. I would not stray from that. It's a mistake.
Yeah.
Until you actually can't, it's got to be him.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we always say. So it's really hard, so it's definitely some hard shoes to fill.
Well, he could still do it. He could still do it, and it's too iconic to try to replace.
Yeah, exactly. So now, Justin, you wear many hats in your projects, such as writer, director, editor, and on occasion you work on visual effects. Which is your favorite out of all your roles when working on films?
Well, directing. I mean, every other role is just a offshoot of directing. Writing is extremely can be extremely time consuming and sort of painful, sort of emotionally. You're alone. You're by yourself. You're trying to generate ideas. It's a very lonely endeavor, and there's no guarantee that what you're writing is ever going to turn into anything. So. It's a necessary evil in my mind, and I enjoy doing it to a degree, but it's only to direct for me.
Okay.
Visual effects is a way for me to finish jobs. And editing, I actually really enjoy too, because it's part of the storytelling. It's actually part of the writing. But to me, writing, directing, and editing is all sort of one thing, and that's directing. I've done so many projects that are independent where I'm doing all three, and to me, it's all that is one thing. That's filmmaking. Storytelling, but I guess to answer your question more clearly, it's directing.
Okay, cool. So now, like you said, you worked on so many projects and then you had a love for it from a young age. Can you tell us a little bit about Boca Studios?
Yeah, so about 7 or 8 years ago, we I was working on The Amazing Race, Canada, the Canadian version. I was a producer. I used to, I work a lot in these big TV shows as a producer or a director. And my friend Rob, who actually is the director of Amazing Race Canada, he's directed every single episode. Him and I were traveling together on the Amazing Race all over the world, and we decided, it'd be interesting to join forces and to create our own entity, our own company that we could use to create projects, a company that we could use to develop commercials and TV shows and movies, acquire gear, build our own little mini studio, so that when we wanted to make films and create our own projects, we wouldn't have to ask permission. We could greenlight ourselves. And so Bokeh Studios is a Toronto-based production studio that that just tells stories across various platforms. So we do a lot of branded content, commercials, and television and movies. But yeah, it was designed to be like a business where we can work with ad agencies, build out visual campaigns, and that sort of thing. But then when we want to make a short film or a pilot or something crazy, we have the resources to do it. We have our own gear, our own cameras, our own studio.
Okay.
And so that's what Bokeh is. It's a mini production studio designed to tell stories in various forms.
Okay, that's awesome. Now, you have also collaborated with director Eli Roth in a
Mhm.
variety of projects in both television and film. You also the second unit director for Thanksgiving. What are some things that you learned working with Eli?
I've worked with Eli on a few projects. We've done 8 projects together, 6 episodes of television. We worked on this Halloween VR project for Meta, for Facebook, and then Thanksgiving as well. So Eli is amazing. He's really smart. He's very collaborative. He's a true like he's a true fan of the genre. He's almost like he's like a connoisseur of horror films and
Mm,
very knowledgeable. And working with him, it's interesting. I learned a lot about just hiring the right people and trusting them. He's the type of director that doesn't second guess himself at all. He's very quick to make decisions. He trusts people. Very, very smart, very
mm,
kind. And he just hires the right people and then trusts them to do their job properly and doesn't try to micromanage them. And because of that approach, people do a lot of great work for him
no,
because they feel like what they're doing is contributing. He's not insecure or paranoid or anything like that. He's great in that way. I actually learned a lot about collaboration from working with Eli.
okay. That's good, I mean, because it's like, to carry on through your own films and everything like that. So that's a great thing to learn from a legend like himself. So, and like from your films and everything like that, like I have to say, I'm really impressed. I have to say, I am a big fan of your short films, and I think it's really impressive how you create stories in such a short amount of time. Can you talk about your process when creating these types of films?
Yeah, I mean, I've done multiple episodes of television where each episode is a 45-minute sort of short film that were produced by Eli Roth as well. So we did
Okay.
2 different series. One was called Urban Legend. One was called The Haunted Museum. Both are on Max.
Okay.
Um, and along with doing short films, working in that sort of form, doing television does force you to work very, very fast, where you have a deadline and you've got to put stuff out very quickly. What's my process? My process is to develop the idea, very, very quickly, try to develop an idea, which is the hardest part of the entire process, actually.
Mm,
Trying to trying to come up with the spark of an idea that you're going to be passionate enough about to see through is the most difficult part of the process. That is sort of like, a magic part of the process where I don't even know how to explain to people how to come up with an idea.
mm,
It's difficult because I wouldn't even be able to tell people where ideas come from because it's one of those things you just have to be open creatively to ideas and then they come, but you have to put yourself in a state of mind where you're actually open to it.
mm,
It's for me, it's a process of staying in a certain creative zone. It's like you get into a zone, a flow where suddenly you're welcoming ideas. You're not distracted. You're not on social media. You're not like watching television or sports or video games. You're sort of like you have to force yourself into this frame of mind where ideas can flow. especially if you're on a deadline and it has to happen quickly. So for me, there's this interesting sort of ideation process that happens where an idea will come, and then very quickly I'll try to write a screenplay, or I'll do an outline first. And the outline, if it's a feature film or a TV show, it'll start with an outline where you just jot down beat for beat everything that happens in that story. And that process of ideation, coming up with the idea and then creating a beat sheet is the most challenging.
Mm.
Then once I have a beat sheet, an outline, and a story that I like, I'll start to talk about it with friends and family and people and tell them the story and see if it hooks their interest, see if it's worth, sticking with. And if it is, then you move into the screenplay. And the screenplay is now sort of the fun part because you've got the idea is exciting, and you've got this outline, and then the script writing happens. And I stay very regimented. I'm very disciplined with it. So I know that I can do a good 3 pages an hour,
Okay.
And so what I do is if I'm writing the screenplay, I give myself, 2 hours of actual hands-on keys writing time a day to do a minimum of 6 pages a day. Now, those hours can be spread out. They can all be together, but I will not go to bed without 6 pages done at a minimum. And if you just did that every single day, you have a screenplay in no time.
Yeah.
And at least a draft of it that you can go back to. Then the process is rewriting that. I try to get that first draft out 6 pages a day as quick as possible because if I'm not disciplined about it, it doesn't happen. And so 6 pages a day, get the screenplay out, and then rewrite the crap out of the screenplay until it's done, and worthy of showing people. Never show the first draft. I always polish it, at least do a second draft, then start showing people, and then continue polishing it. For a film like Carved, I had a co-writer, Cheryl Meyer, who worked with me, and her and I went back and forth on this screenplay, until it was ready. And that process was a bit different. I would do about 10 pages and then pass it off to her, and then she would go back and she would rewrite it, add things, change things while I was doing the next 10. And then so it was like I was always one step ahead, and then we would switch. Yeah, and then once the screenplay is done, then you have to go and make this thing.
Yeah.
But that's the process for me in terms of coming up with a story. That's the hardest part.
Yeah.
The rest of it, like directing and editing is really the fun part. But unless you have a really good script and story and a really good screenplay and an idea worth considering, I mean, it's nothing. Can't even move into that process. So for me, the ideation and script is the most important, and that's what kickstarts everything.
Okay. That's a great, lesson for a lot of listeners and that up and coming to make films. So thank you for sharing that. But it's really cool. Like I said earlier, you shared like the story about your mom, and now, for all your short films, you won so many cool awards and festivals, but you're also able to make a project with your wife and your children. How was that experience like for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I've done a couple with my wife. I've done 3 projects with her. Listen, like going back to that story about my mom and point of view, that first short film I made, that first film, I learned a very important lesson there.
Mm.
This is kind of this is something I've actually never mentioned on another podcast. So this is some truth here.
Okay.
When I made this first short film, point of view, I was very precious about it. I thought, this, is this going to work? And there was visual effects. There was about 30 shots in this that required visual effects, and I didn't have a visual effects person. I was doing it all by myself. So I was teaching myself After Effects. That film took a long time to make because of me learning visual effects and me doubting the project and not knowing if it was going to be good. And my mom was sick. I mean, she was really sick. And by the time, I was getting close to finishing it, my mom passed away. This was like 12 years ago. So it was a long time ago, but this is what happened. My mom passed away and she never saw this short movie that she wanted to produce. And then I was like, oh my God, she never saw it. I felt so guilty. So I stopped working on it. So 3 years went by and this film sat on a hard drive on my desk. And I just thought, no one's going to care. It's not going to be good. It's going to be a piece of shit. And I felt really guilty and I couldn't even look at it. And then after a couple of years, I just sort of thought, maybe I'll look at that again. Maybe I'll finish it. I was so busy working in television, like, there's something there that's kind of cool. let me look at it. So I opened up the project and looked at it, and it was actually like pretty good. And I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna finish it. That's fine. I'll just finish this movie. And you know, I finished the visual effects, got some music done, and then I thought, okay, well, there it is, and let's see what happens. And I started looking around, and you know, I didn't know much about film festivals at the time, and I just started looking into it and thought, okay, I'll just submit it to some film festivals. Let's see what happens. I just discovered, you know, that you could just submit online. And I submitted this to a few film festivals, and it got into every single film festival. And it got into all these festivals, and it started winning all these awards and got all this attention. And I thought, oh my God, people like this movie. Like, you know, I got into Fantasia in Montreal with this, and we opened for Cooties, the Elijah Wood movie, and I flew there. And I flew there and I experienced something I had never experienced before, which was a horror film festival. And oh my gosh, this was so inspiring. I was like, why did I sit on this for years? Why was I so scared to show people? What was I thinking? This genre and this film world, this horror community, they're passionate about this. People loved it. Like, why didn't I show people? And then so I went through a phase of, you know what, I'm not gonna be precious. You know what? The movie doesn't have to be perfect. It's ridiculous to sit there and think it has to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to exist, and it has to be. You know, you can make stuff very quick. So then I decided to, you know, make another one when I was at this. You know, I stumbled into a antique store and I saw this cookie jar on a shelf that was a clown head. And I thought, okay, here we go. Let's make another short film using this cookie jar. It's so creepy. But this time I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to do it as fast as possible. So from the moment I found that cookie jar to the moment I delivered the short film cookie was 6 weeks. From idea to finished edit, like finished mix, done, delivered into film festivals. 6 weeks. That movie got into South by Southwest. It got into all these film festivals. It won so many awards. I was like, what? Why was I so insecure with point of view? It's ridiculous. And then I'm like, let's do it again. So, you know, let's not like overthink it. I've got, you know, I have this amazing cottage property, like a family cottage on an island. I had a newborn kid, or like at that point, he was a bit older. He was 14 months old. I'm like, let's just make a movie at the cottage with our son Bowen, and not overthink it. So we did that, and then again, same thing happened. We got into TIFF. We won all these awards, you know, and it was just, and so Cookie and Latched, which was in TIFF, were both made with my wife and with some friends and friends of family, and we're using my properties, or my Cookie was shot at my sister's house. So those films were made with existing resources, just stuff I had around.
Yeah.
And they just, you know, went so far into film festivals and won so many awards. And it's because of those short films that I was discovered to do Carved. Okay. It's also, you know, and simultaneously, I was discovered by the team that was putting together these TV shows for Eli Roth here in Toronto, because I had these multiple short films out there winning awards and creating some noise. So simultaneously, I got involved with Thanksgiving and Eli Roth, and got to do Carved and develop that with 20th Century and with Hulu at the same time, two different camps, because of short films I was making in my backyard with my family.
That's awesome. Oh man,
that was a very long-winded way to say that the lesson that I learned was to just not be too precious about it. You know, it's actually more important to just keep making stuff. And while one thing is out there being judged, you know, you should already be making something else. Even right now, Carved is out there, it's being released, and people are judging it, and people are reviewing it, and it's out there. It can't do anything for me anymore. It's the process of making it was a gift that it gave me, and now that it's out to the world, it can give me no more gifts in terms of new opportunities. I have to start other ones, and so I'm already creating and developing other projects, and Carved is in the rearview mirror, and so it's like it's a matter of staying within this creative flow and just being a professional creator at this point, or filmmaker.
Yeah, that was awesome, man. Thank you for, you know, sharing that story, you know, about with your mom and everything like that, and the process of everything. And just sometimes we just get on our heads, and we always change ourselves. But, you know, I'm glad that it all worked out for you. So, and it, like you said today, it brought the opportunity for us to have you on the podcast and talk about Carved. So, let's get into that. Can you give the listeners a synopsis of the film?
Yeah, well, Carved is a story about a group of employees that work at a historical reenactment village that become trapped within this like pioneer village when a sentient pumpkin springs to life and starts to slaughter everyone involved in the annual carving contest. So think of it, I mean, I pitched it early as a film like, imagine, think of like Tremors meets Evil Dead, but it's its own thing though. It's funny. It's a funny movie like Evil Dead in terms of its bonkers over the top approach to some of these kills and stuff, but it's very much a B movie like Tremors, where it's a basic story about a group of people trapped just trying to get out. I love movies like Tremors or The Thing, where it's very contained and they're just trying to escape. Because these movies are very for this. I just love a group of people trying to get from point A to point B. You know. And so that's what the movie is. It's a story of survival and a group of employees that must work together to escape. But this pumpkin has witnessed a carving contest, and it is hell bent on slaughtering everyone.
Yeah. Now this is now streaming on Hulu for the Huluween special. Huluween is Hulu's annual Halloween celebration. This year is a return for its 7th year. Uh, how does it feel having your film featured on such a standout platform?
It's really bizarre because it's very much a low budget handmade horror film. It's designed to be the type of movie that it was conceived and executed as a film that not only takes place in the 90s, but is actually created and brought to life using 90s film techniques. So
Mm,
the pumpkin itself is an actual puppet.
okay.
There's a little bit of CGI for shots where there has to be, but it's 90% of this is done practically in camera with a foam latex puppet that has animatronics built into it. And so this is a very low budget handmade B movie put out by Hulu in 106 countries, in 40 languages. I've made other short, I've made other low budget horror movies before, and it's rare that you see one that's put out by a streamer like that can actually that has the power and the means to put it out so wide,
Hmm.
but to have that thing that they've put out be a super violent B movie. This
Yeah.
is a made for TV style B movie. That's what this is.
Yeah.
Um, and it's strange to see it with such a wide release, because I can see the analytics. You can see that it's like number one in India, it's number two in Singapore, it's number three
Yep.
in Hong Kong, it's number five in Canada. It's just like you can see it. It's like doing really well. It's on the top 10 in all these countries. It's been on the top 10 on Hulu all week, for over a week. And it's this crazy bonkers movie that they just let us make and supported us along the way, which was like a dream come true for indie filmmakers because it's so ridiculous. Like this movie is
Yeah.
inherently ridiculous. So we wanted to make something that was, honored those 90s monster movies. You don't really see those anymore.
Yeah.
If you do see them, they're not put out this wide. So
No.
it's surreal to see it out there. It's the type of movie that's going to actually piss off a lot of horror fans because it's very, very funny. But it's also the type of movie that people will love if they love comedy in their horror. It's very comedy forward. Um, and so it's surreal. It's like because it's sort of a very polarizing movie. You either love it or hate it. So it's really crazy to see the love and the hate across so many countries. But it's great. Hulu I'm very impressed with how they handled, this project. Me as a filmmaker, as an independent filmmaker, they were very hands off, very supportive, and very collaborative. And what even, coming up with the poster, doing the trailers, every single note I had, every detail they would accommodate with
Mhm.
ease, and they supported the world premiere, and it just was fantastic. You
Yeah.
know, you don't expect that from these types of big streamers necessarily. I mean, maybe you do these days. I don't know, but whenever you hear of filmmakers working with studios, there's like always some sort of like creative difference or some sort of
Exactly.
bumping against each other. There was none of that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Fantastic, fantastic streamer to work with.
I love to hear things like that because like some directors and they just always kind of have that story where it's like I had this idea, but it got pushed to the side because they had to take it out. So I love to hear things like that, and then like you said, the film's been doing great. The streaming numbers have been crazy. I've been seeing nothing but great comments. Someone had put that they don't make movies like this anymore, except they did. And
Yeah,
so, yeah,
they
so
don't make movies like this
exactly.
anymore. And the instinct when you make a movie like this would be to do it mostly with CGI because this is a pumpkin. It's not a
Yeah.
pumpkin head creature. It's not a humanoid. It's not a man
Hmm.
in suit. It's not some evil demonic possessed thing that looks like a pumpkin. We've seen that. We've seen all those versions before. This is just an actual pumpkin that moves around like a spider or an octopus and slaughters everyone, in its path. It's done. Like, how do you even make it run around? Like, how do you make a foam puppet that, is the shape of a pumpkin move and jump and attack? It is extremely challenging to try to do this, practically, but that was the sort of the spark that excites me about this idea the most, is doing a monster movie the way that Tremors was done.
No.
Tremors was done in so many different ways. They had miniatures, they did hand puppets, they had all these different like techniques. And the goal here was to try to do the same thing. Like, can you use reverse photography, puppeteering, and there's so much creative puppeteering in this that was done by our head puppeteer was Jonathan Craig.
Okay.
And the puppet itself, the creature, was designed by Alan Cook, who fabricated this puppet. He made 4 versions of it, one that had animatronics, one that had the shotgun blast. There was different ones made for different angles. On my Instagram, there's a video where I do a tour of the puppet shop, and you can see this. That's why sometimes I read reviews, they're like, oh, it's all CGI. It's like, oh my God, did you watch this thing? This is handmade puppeteering. Yeah, there's some CGI, of course.
Yeah.
This is like Slither. Okay, if you saw Slither was a blend, right, where you go practical as much as possible, and then there are digital elements, and there is some CGI, but it's not. This is 90% puppetry. This is a practical film for the most part. I mean, we the amount of work that went into doing this, in camera is absurd. But that's what I love. That's how we did Thanksgiving. When I worked on Thanksgiving, my second unit handled a lot of some of the close-ups of the gore, some of the real time-consuming elements that are practical in camera. Anything that doesn't show the main cast, that's showing gore. My unit was in there helping with some shots, and that it was the same approach here. It's like doing it in camera as much as possible is the craft that I love about this genre the most. Mm-hmm. And it would have been so much easier if we did this full CGI. So much easier.
Yeah, but the thing is,
it wouldn't have had that vintage vibe.
Yeah, and that's not your style. You know what I mean? You're more practical effects. See, you like CGI, but not that much. Practical effects is your style. You know what I mean? And that's something that you put out there. And so I think it's cool for to have platforms like this for people to hear, your views and everything about that, because sometimes you have to just use like a little bit of CGI, but hearing, hey, this is a puppeteering film, and all the hard work that was put into it, so yeah, it's hard for times, some people just have all those comments and everything like that, but
or they lie and say it's 95% CGI. No. That is an absolute lie. So I'll tell you this: every single close-up of the pumpkin is practical puppetry. There's 4 or 5 shots of the pumpkin in its entirety where it's running or something, or like where it's a wider shot where it is CGI, but only 5 or 6 shots out of all the shots. Most of the CGI is removing puppeteers, removing rods, or adding vines to a practical puppet that already has a practical head and a practical vine. The way that we puppeteer this thing is it's basically a foam latex creature that's suspended off of an easy rig that's normally used to hold video cameras. And Jonathan would float it off of an easy rig and puppeteer it that way. So it's actually hanging, and then one puppeteer would be on each side puppeteering a vine. So it's usually a head and 2 vines that are practical. Now this is a creature that walks on 4 vines. So sometimes we're adding digital vines on top, or alongside practical vines where you can't really tell which one's which. And that's how it was done. It was puppeteered in camera that way with this easy rig, and then other times where you see it in a wide shot and it's running, especially when Kevin's watching through the binoculars and you can see it scurrying around. That's all practical, all of that, okay. And it's all done with the full puppet happening against a blue screen and then comped in. So it's not CGI. It's even when it's done as an element and put into the environment, it's still puppeteered against a blue screen as an element. And those aren't using CGI vines. Every time we see it wide, through Kevin's point of view, it's 100% puppetry.
Okay. Cool.
So when I read something that says, "Oh, it's all CGI," my head explodes and my blood boils, because it is not. It is something that we crafted with our hands, like old school, 90s, 80s filmmakers, to give it a vibe that felt like it had that vibe. I want to see the foam latex. I want to see I want to see it. It's like when you watch Evil Dead, it's so charming to see this type of handmade, gore and effects. You can feel the love behind those effects. And that's just what we physically did making this movie.
Oh,
That was
okay.
the approach.
Now, for listeners, a lot of people that probably just tuned in for Hulu. But this is Carved is based off of a 2018 short film of the same name. Where did you get the idea for Carved? And can you also share how it was also turned into a full-length film?
Yeah, the spark of the idea of a pumpkin that is carving humans into
Mm,
jack-o'-lanterns, like flipping it that way, was an idea that came to me many years ago. I live in Toronto, and when I was in high school, I went to an art school, and I could paint and sculpt very well. And I got hired at the Toronto Zoo as a exhibit designer. So I would design and fabricate artificial habitats at the Toronto Zoo. And this zoo was a big attraction. It's one of the biggest zoos in the world, actually.
mhm.
And each department during Halloween would compete in this annual pumpkin carving contest, where each department would put out a pumpkin carving, and we would have this massive exhibit at the zoo where the guests would come in, school groups, families, anyone that would visit a zoo, they'd come to this massive exhibit, and you'd see all these pumpkin carvings with a label for each department. And our department, which was the interpretation, culture, and design department, who did the artificial habitats, because we were artists, our pumpkins were really elaborate. And every single year we won, and we were undefeated, literally undefeated. And it was because the guests voted. It was never like a political thing. We were always awarded from the public, and our pumpkins, every department would try to beat us and try to one up our pumpkins. They never could. And so every year we took this carving contest very seriously, and we would have these brainstorming sessions and pitch ideas like, what should our pumpkin be this year? And one year I just pitched the idea we should do a sentient pumpkin, like an evil pumpkin that's actually carving a human, and we make a latex human that looks real with the top of its head cut off, and it's got like
Mm.
a spoon, like scooping at the brains, and there's brains everywhere, and it looks real. And the whole department just slowly turned and looked at me like, are you insane? This is children voting. These are like school groups coming through. I was like, yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I was like a teenager. I'm like, wouldn't that be great? Like a cop. This is the late 90s. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
And we ended up, they're like, no, you're an idiot. That's not gonna work. And we ended up doing a life-size orangutan called Poopy the Pumpkin Primate that was named after an actual orangutan. And this thing was like 5 feet tall with full carrot fingers and arms made with like dozens of pumpkins. And we had to use a forklift to move this into the exhibit. And again, we won. We won every
Okay.
single year. Anyway, the idea, that's where it came from. And then years later, because my short films were out in festivals, there was a curator that called me one day and said, "Hey, your films are doing really great. We're looking for filmmakers, short filmmakers, to pitch Halloween ideas to Hulu. That's going to be part of the Huluween Film Festival. Do you have
Mhm.
any ideas? Or take a week and think about it, and let me know if you have any good ideas. If I like them, I'll set you up with a meeting with the studio, which is at the time was Fox Studios."
Okay.
And so I pitched multiple ideas. One was, hey, a killer pumpkin that's slaughtering and carving humans. And then a week later, he called and said, "Oh, we like this pumpkin idea. We'll set up a Skype meeting with the studio heads." It was Fox Digital Studios, a division of Fox that was doing these like smaller short films. And I said, okay, I'm not gonna jump on a Skype though. I'm gonna go there. So I got my own plane ticket and flew there, went to the studio and pitched this idea. And that's how it got greenlit. And
Okay.
they said, we like this pumpkin idea. It's really fun. They gave me a little budget. It was like $35,000 or something like that, to make a 5-minute movie that showcased this killer pumpkin. And that's how it got greenlit. And then we went over the course of 2 days and shot this 5-minute movie,
Mm.
which was entered into the Huluween Film Festival in 2018 as part of this, contest. There was me and 7 other filmmakers from all over the world that were selected and were involved in this. And then the contest was this was going to run throughout the Halloween season, and based on jury votes and engagement online, they were going to pick a winner to do to work on a development deal, and there was a cash prize. And then our film ended up winning. So Carved won this Halloween Film Festival,
Okay.
and that's how the conversations began to turn this into a feature film. So
Oh, that's awesome.
that was 6 years ago.
Oh, that's awesome. And so, the film had a great standout cast, such as Peyton Elizabeth Lee. She starred in Andy Mack, one of my kids' favorite shows. I think it was her first horror film. How was it
Mhm.
easing her into this role?
It was her first horror film. she was looking to do something different, yeah, she had just done Prom Pact, which is such a great movie. I watched it with my kid. We loved it.
Mm.
And she's been, a professional actor her whole entire life. As a child actor, she's been involved at Disney doing Andy Mack, like you said, and other shows and other films. And she's very young. She was only 19 years old when we filmed this
Okay.
April. She turned 20, I think, in May. Excuse me, but it was interesting because she is someone that doesn't watch a lot of horror movies, you
Yeah.
know. And I had to, I had to sort of explain to her what this is. This is a throwback to movies I liked when I was her age. When I was a teenager many many years ago, watching these types of movies, like movies like she had never seen Aliens.
Oh.
She had never seen
Uh,
Tremors. So, talking to her, I have like all these references. Like, oh, I've never seen that. I've never seen that. I'm like, oh my God, you've never seen Aliens? Go watch Aliens. Go watch Tremors. Go watch
yeah.
Evil Dead. Go watch The Thing. Have you seen Little Shop of Horrors? Go watch that too. This is inspired by those movies, but it's not those movies. It's my movie. It's something different, but it's inspired by those movies. And what we're doing is, I showed her the designs of the puppet, of the creature. I showed her storyboards of all the kills. I had every single kill storyboarded. I had this amazing world Bible that had all my tests for the puppet and how it was going to work, and had to really explain to her like what this is in terms of its tone and its essence.
Mm.
And I think and obviously she really liked it because then she jumped on board. She's like, you know what, I'm in. This sounds fun. And I should say this about Peyton. She is a unusually smart young person.
Mm.
When I was 19 years old, I was not such a mature professional person. She is so smart that I think that Peyton will be a director one day. And when I was casting this movie, I was looking for someone that I believe could be a writer director because that's the character. She writes and directs the plays at this
Mm.
village. And I had, my whole thing with the casting director was I just have to believe that this person actually could be a writer and a director. Like she has to have that creativity behind the eyes, that sort of intelligence. And with Peyton, she obviously had all that. And then working with her, I realized she actually has that even in real life more than I ever thought because, working with her to bring this to life was very collaborative. And I feel like Peyton is going to be the head of a studio one day. I think one day we're all in the industry going to be working for Peyton because she's just a brilliant mind. She's so creative, and I think she just finished filming her first short film, which I'm very excited to see because this is somebody who has it in her DNA.
Okay.
And it was really cool to introduce her to this sort of genre, the subgenre of comedy horror.
Hmm.
This is not trying to be an elevated A24 style movie. This is a low budget Roger Corman style, early Sam Raimi, Peter Jackson, wrote all night
Yeah.
long. It's going to be a shit show, and that's what this is. That's what we're paying homage to. And I had to, she had to jump on board with that.
Oh, that's awesome. Then we have DJ Qualls from Road Trip and Chris Elliott. What was it like working with such an experienced group of people on this project?
Sort of a dream come true. I mean, I grew up loving Chris Elliott and DJ Qualls, and I wanted actors in these roles that contributed to this like 90s sort of throwback feeling. And
Mm.
so, when writing these characters, um, I was thinking in these roles for Bill and for Clint's dad, we really need people that hopefully we can land people that are recognizable, that come from the comedy world
Mhm.
too. I mean, the big goal here was to sort of approach actors that are inherently funny, funny people that will bring that sort of comedy to the table. And who better than Chris Elliott, who's in my mind
Yeah.
like such an amazing, iconic comedic actor that is like also bringing oddball ideas to the table that I love. He's got a very
Mhm.
in my mind, for my sensibility, this like really strange approach that I love, like in Something About Mary, the character with the white head on his eyeball and
Yeah.
like all those blotches, that was his idea. That wasn't in the script, you
Okay.
know. It's like those types of ideas are what you want from a guy like Chris Elliott. So, it was like a dream come true to sort of even get the chance to talk to them. It was like this. We had a Zoom and I was able to show
Hmm.
them all their skills on storyboard and explain what this is. And then to work with them was it's the actual shooting of a film like this is so high stress and we're doing night shoots, right? So it's very making these movies isn't always as fun as you think it is. It can be very very stressful. You're working against the clock. This is low budget, very, very short window of time to shoot, not many shoot days. And so everything's very, very, very fast paced. So in the moment, you just need actors that are going to just show up and deliver. And both of them, DJ Qualls and Chris Elliott, were so professional. I work more with DJ because Chris Elliott's roles, even it's more like a cameo. He's only got a few scenes. He was only with us for a couple of days, where DJ's role was a much bigger role. And so with Chris, he came in and we shot that ridiculous scene of him, that scene where he gets taken out, fighting this. Which is essentially where this pumpkin is puppeteering his dead son who's trying to kill him. So, and that pumpkin is in real life a puppet. So we're puppeteering a creature that's puppeteering a human that's trying to blow the head off his own father. It's like, try to explain that to someone. You can't even visualize it. But I had every shot storyboarded, so I was able to walk them through all the storyboards and show them how we were going to do it and explain to it. And then on the day, it's just a matter of executing what I had planned out. We're not sitting there brainstorming, trying to be creative, trying to discover what the shots are. We're executing my plan very, very efficiently. It's just like, we need this shot, then we need this shot, and we're moving very, very fast. And Chris was such a professional that, it was a gift, because that's what I needed. I needed someone who had been here before, that knew how to be efficient and work with the plan and go with the flow. And he was awesome at that. Yeah. Such a professional, never was tired, never was grumpy, never had attitude. And at the end wrote this nice big letter of gratitude. And, I love that. And then DJ, I worked with DJ a lot more because he was in multiple scenes, and the same sort of thing. DJ's been an actor for so long. He's been around for over 20 years in all kinds of projects and all kinds of genres. Comedy, sci-fi, and horror, and he is just very professional. He's like the real deal. He's a great actor. The way he approaches scenes, the way that he gets into the character, his prep for it, he is like a hyper professional. And working with him was great. I mean, we're doing night shoots, like I mentioned, almost every day. And so it's, for filmmakers out there that have done this, they know. For people that haven't done this, that want to be filmmakers, when you're making horror films and it's all nighttime and you have to do night shoots, it's very challenging mentally, physically. It kind of can break you down. It can break a team down because you start to get delirious. Everyone's sleep schedule's thrown off. You're kind of in a zone where you're just eating comfort foods. You start to feel grumpy because it's like you sink deeper and deeper into despair and into madness as the weeks go on in these night shoots. And it's very difficult. Yeah. So what I do is I try to keep it fun. I carry a boombox with me and I blast music like a DJ so that when you come into my set and it's like 3 a.m, it's more like a party. It's a little bit more like everyone's half delirious, like, okay. And I talk to each actor beforehand and say, I like to play music. This is something that I learned from actually, another director, Corin Hardy. Do you know Corin? Okay. He directed The Nun.
Yep.
I did second unit on Corin's last movie, which hasn't come out yet. It's an amazing horror film called Whistle. It hasn't come out. Okay. But after Thanksgiving, I did Whistle, and Corin did this. He played music the whole time. And not like scary music and that sort of thing, just music to create just a fun vibe. So it never really felt like work. And I thought, I'm going to try that because, in these night shoots, it's going to get dark. It's going to, emotionally, it's going to get dark. So I had this boom box and then this playlist, and I would just play music. And you could, I talked to each actor beforehand and say, hey, I'm going to play some music. Is that going to mess with your process? Like, are you a method, actor? And everyone was like, no, we can jump into it. Like, play your music. It's cool. And so I would blast music, have this playlist, and keep it like a bit of a party vibe. And I feel like every time DJ was on set, he would come in and he was so like, he'd love the music because I'd play like bangers from the 80s and from the 90s, like just old school stuff. And it always would turn into like a dance party where, he'd come marching in with everyone else and like, oh my God, who's the DJ? And like, the smoke's going and there's like beams of light. And then, the crew's lighting and the whole crew's bopping around. That's how I like to run the film set when we're doing night shoots. And so DJ, I think he had a good time for the most part. But working with him was like working with an utmost professional that made my life easy, because as a director, I'm trying to make something that involves a puppet, that involves kills and gore and blood. And it's so challenging to try to put these movies together. I'm working with a child actor, working with a bird, real animals and puppets. It's so difficult. The one thing that I really needed for my cast was for them to be professional and not demand too much from me. Like 99% of directing is just casting the right people and then not micromanaging them. And someone like DJ just was for me the perfect call because he's recognizable and carries that like nostalgic vibe from the 90s, but also is just an amazing actor who's
Mm.
professional and prepared and steps into those roles and nails it every single time. And then if I have direction or need to make an adjustment, he doesn't have like an ego about it either. He's like, oh yeah, great, got it. You know, he wants to do it right. He wants to work with the director, and it's like a gift.
That's awesome. And I just love your approach to working on nights because myself, I work full time overnights, so I understand how it is to kind of like just adapt to that. It's different, so some people won't understand. So I love the way that you brought in the music and everything and kind of like work with the people to kind of get past everything. So that was cool to hear.
Yeah. This is the boombox here that I carry. It's the same one that Corin Hardy had on set on his whistle set.
Okay.
It's a little one that's it's very powerful and you can wear
Yeah.
it, right? So I would, you get the Bluetooth going on this little boombox, and wherever you go, you're beaming out this like fun energy.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes when things aren't working and it gets dark and we're like losing the day, if I'm not playing the music, I think the crew knew like, okay, we're behind schedule and we need to
Yeah.
like keep it up. But I would try to on a daily basis just keep it going, keep that energy up.
That's
Um, yeah, working with Eli Roth and then working with Corin Hardy directly before I rolled into
hmm
Carved was amazing because both those directors are so incredible. They're world-class filmmakers, and watching the way that they run their sets and handle it was the most incredible, most inspiring preparation a director could ever ask for. To work with
Yeah.
a horror icon like Eli,
hmm
helping him bring these kills to life, in the sort of like hands-on you know, getting into the close-ups, getting actually into the filmmaking with him side by side to bring some of these kills to life and to be able to help, and then to work with Corin, who is such a gentle spirit, such a creative person who was so grateful for his crew, and to be able to work with both these guys leading into my own film was just like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
stole so much of their I
Yep.
tried to absorb so much of their power and their technique to bring into my film because making a movie is it requires such a intense emotional output from you as a filmmaker
hmm
that to me inspiration is everything, and without it you can barely get through a shoot like this. So I listen to podcasts like yours, I listen to film directors, I listen to
Okay.
interviews, I try to absorb all this knowledge from other filmmakers and bring it with me. And so shout out to Corin and to Eli because
hmm
working with both those guys was just like it was the inspiration I needed to go into something as bonkers as this, and try to make something that is a bit more of like a cult type
Yeah.
film.
Yep. No, that's awesome. So, Huluween also featured another film that was really good called Mr. Crockett. So, both films feature actor Elvis Nolasco. What was it like working with him on Carved?
Yeah, Elvis is such an interesting actor. He approaches these movies with a bit more of a method approach, where he comes in character. He's the real deal,
Yeah.
Elvis Nolasco. And the reason why he's in both these movies or in Carved as well as Mr. Crockett is we had the same team of producers. So
Okay.
Mr. Crockett and Carved are both produced by David Worthen Brooks and his team, which is RB Pedrosian and Jenna Cavalli. They are the team, and Miles Alva. They are the producers that worked on both films.
Mm.
And so, when I was casting the reporter at AJ, I was looking for, a really good actor that could bring something unique and, take this sort of small role and do something interesting with it. And I was sort of open to any suggestions. And Jenna, who had just worked with him on Mr. Crockett, one of our producers, said, "Oh my gosh, you should look at Elvis. What he did on Mr. Crockett is something I've never seen before.
Mm.
The way that he slips into character, his approach of coming in, the way that he prepares, a bit more of a method approach where he's so heavy on the prep and he comes in character and you're dealing with the actual character. She's like, you gotta consider this guy. And then so I met with him like this and same thing, showed him like all my references, storyboards, and it was like, hey, are you on board to make something bonkers and something that is like gonna be ridiculous and funny and scary? And again, like after seeing all the storyboards and all the plans, he was like, hell yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, he showed up and brought something to that character that I never thought would be in there. I mean, to me, that character on the in the script, he's there at the beginning, and he's not a throwaway character, but it's a minor role. It's not like a major role in
Yeah.
this movie. It's a minor role. But he elevated that role, and he brought this character to life in a way that was so interesting, and he improvised a bunch of stuff that is in the movie that wasn't in the script.
Okay.
Every time he's like, oh, if he interrupts me one more time,
I
what
was
the
gonna
fuck's
say
wrong
that.
with these people? Like all those little mumblings were not in the
Yep.
script. That was Elvis doing his thing, and you know, as a director watching it, it's funny when you're directing because you're kind of like watching your own movie, live in front of you like a play, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, none of this is in the script. It's like so different and interesting. I like it. And then but that's how it was working with Elvis. He just came in as this creative force and brought all these extras to the table that made the part better than I expected it to be.
That's awesome. So now Carved had its world premiere at Screamfest in LA. What
Mhm.
was it like being able to see your film on the big screen with fans?
It was weird and surreal because we had just finished it. I
Okay.
literally had just delivered the movie, 2 weeks prior. We just shot this in April this year.
Okay.
So we filmed this in April, delivered it in August. So the turnaround on this movie was faster than you know, it's faster than any movie should be allowed to be produced. The reason for that obviously is the fact that it's a Halloween movie and we have to get it out for Halloween.
Mhm.
So, to finish it in time to even submit to a film festival was crazy. And Screamfest, they happened to, that they happened to fit in our window perfectly. And it was surreal because it was so fast the way it was delivered. It was pumped out as a DCP for the festival, and I didn't even get a chance to even like watch it on a big screen beforehand. So the first time I ever saw it on a big screen was with the entire cast and crew and press and a packed house down in Hollywood in the Chinese theater. It was my first time seeing it on a big screen. It was so weird,
Okay.
because I felt like we just delivered this. There's no time to breathe or think about it or consider what just was delivered. It's just like we finished it, we delivered it, boom, world premiere
Mhm.
in Hollywood at the Chinese theater with the entire cast because they're all in LA. Like I'm in Toronto. Like I'm a
Yeah.
Toronto person. Like I live, north of Toronto. I flew down there. My entire cast and crew are in LA. Even though we shot this film in Kentucky, but all the heads of departments and all the cast are from LA for the most part.
Okay.
Um, Chris is in New York, but most of them are in LA. So going there, all my crew and cast were there, and it was great. It was great, but it's also like a very warm room. So the first time I'm seeing it with a crowd, I'm seeing it with people that are involved in the movie. So obviously it was the most epic screening you can imagine, and
Mhm.
it's the most epic after party. It's the most joyful experience. It's like making a movie it can be it is and it is daunting from beginning
Mhm.
to end. Everything about it is a challenge. It's a sequence of problem solving. um every step of production, you're just solving problems. You're being creative. It requires all this output, and then when it's done and delivered, it's surreal to sit back and think, oh wow, it exists for the world now to just
Yeah.
put on and have fun with or not. And just to see it on the big screen like that, it just feels crazy. And it's like the one truly joyful, carefree moment of filmmaking is when you're just watching the premiere. Everything else is you're just deeply immersed in a creative process, which requires energy. It's not pure joy. It's craft, you
Mhm.
know, and it's challenging, but it's a job and you're working, and it's very much a craft driven process. The screening is pure joy,
Yeah.
and you sit
So.
back and go, okay, it was worth it. All this time, all this stress. Here we go. It's just a movie. It's just a
Mhm.
movie, and it's crazy because it's a Corman style, low budget, handmade B monster movie from the 90s. It's been teleported here. And it's like, what are people going to think of this? We don't see movies like this anymore.
Mhm.
Not really. You do. Shutter puts out some stuff like this every now and then, but it's not released to the masses the way this is.
Exactly.
And so it's like, it's like, I don't, it's like, well, hopefully people like it, but this movie's made for me as a teenager. And, other people can enjoy it or not, but that's what this is. And, the screen. So the screening was surreal, but it was biased because it's my people, it's my cast, my crew, and
Mhm.
and then so then a couple days later we had our Canadian premiere at the Vancouver Horror Show,
Okay.
And that was a less biased crowd because I just went with the writer and one of our producers, Arby and Cheryl. We went together, and that screening was great too because it was with people that weren't associated with the movie, who had no idea what the story was, who had no idea, and that was great because that was the first time I saw it with an unbiased audience.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
Now, with everything going on in this film, the from it coming from a short film to a full length, what are some things that you learned on working on this project?
Oh, that's a good question. Some stuff that I learned working on this project. Well, you know, doing night shoots is if you have a story, if you're a filmmaker and you have a story that involves night shoots, just logistically you can't get around it. Like sometimes you have stories that take place at night, but maybe it's inside, so you can black out windows, or maybe it's underground, or it's you have more control, or it's in a studio. If you're shooting on location at nighttime, having a minor in your cast is creates a sequence of challenges for you that are very difficult just from a scheduling standpoint. Um, Now, Wyatt Lindler, who played our Trevor character, is such an amazing, natural, talented actor. And the story is very much about this brother-sister dynamic who are orphans. They've lost their parents. Our story is very much the story about a woman who is an orphan and sort of in a motherly role. Like she's a parental figure for her brother, along with her boyfriend, who just learned her boyfriend's leaving. And then that's the character story that we're telling. It's a story of a codependent relationship that's falling apart and her discovering she doesn't need to rely on him. If I make a sequel or if I make other movies that involve night shoots, I'd be very reluctant to put a minor into it. Working with working with children, puppets, or animals are always very difficult.
Yeah.
And we had all three in this movie. I think, or I would sort of avoid sort of leaning so much into night shoots if possible. It just makes everything so much more challenging. It's really hard to have fun while you're shooting.
Yeah.
The pumpkin itself and trying to bring this thing to life, we tested it heavily. And we sort of had different methods of how to bring it to life, but there was a lot of lessons learned with the puppet. I mean, we shot in Lexington, Kentucky in the springtime, so in April, where it's, you're in tornado season. And we got hit with rain every day. We just got boom, just like get dropped with rain and thunder and lightning. And our puppet would get soaking wet. And this is latex, this is foam latex that would saturate like a sponge with heavy water. So the puppet was unable to be puppeteered. Then we'd have to like hang it on heaters to dry it out. And then we had to like make new vines. It just because the weight of them they would rip apart. And just the physical practicality of trying to use puppets in this like weather, this rain. It was almost impossible to do, So one lesson I learned is I would be very reluctant to ever shoot in the Tornado Valley during the springtime, outside at night ever again. You would have to pay me so much money or convince me or possess me to ever drag me into a scenario where I'm going to be standing there looking at another thunder shower rolling into my film set. You want control. Everything about filmmaking is a challenge. Every single part of filmmaking is a challenge to be solved. Everything. Even just picking up a camera and putting it on a tripod and pointing it at something requires adding gear to it and lenses and handling expensive. Everything's just a challenge. Never mind when you're trying to fly cameras around, move it with puppets and bring in all these elements, and then when we went into this knowing that this project is almost impossible to do within our schedule. And the only way to pull it off is, well, we knew going in that it was almost impossible, even if everything went right. If we had perfect weather, if everything fell into place, even in that scenario, it was almost impossible to make. And our AD, Nick Page, in pre-production would say like, this movie is like a puzzle where nothing fits. In terms of trying to logistically actually physically make it, nothing actually fits. Nothing works together. So everything was a challenge and a problem to try to make it all work. And that's a result of having a very ambitious idea, a very short window to shoot it within, and a small budget, and doing it outside practically, in the weather we had, and so even if everything went great, it would be almost impossible. And then once we started rolling, we got hit with terrible weather the entire time. So everything became so much more challenging than you could ever even imagine going into a
Yeah.
challenging shoot. I would, lessons learned. Avoid night shoots if possible. Avoid shooting outside in the spring in an area where it's known as Tornado Valley. A tornado literally ripped through our set once.
Oh man.
Um, and I think those are the main sort of like lessons that were learned by me because I'm from I live in Toronto. We rarely see a tornado. I mean, it's very
Okay.
rare. I've never in my mind I would never think of a tornado coming through a film set. But when you go to Lexington, Kentucky in April, it's not so unheard of.
hmm Oh man. So this will definitely be a film that's in my family's October film rotation for years to come. I think my kids might have already watched it about like 5 times. I need to know, will we get a sequel down the road? Will we see the return of the Killer Pumpkin?
Well, we'll see. I mean, this thing was just released over a
Uh,
week ago. What is it, Tuesday? It was released 8 days ago. So it's still out there. It's still like
mhm.
not even Halloween yet. So it's out there doing its thing. We'll
Yeah.
see where it lands. I mean, in my mind, this thing is a franchise and that this pumpkin is this first movie is just an introduction to the fact that there's a sentient mutant, monster on the prowl for anything that touches a pumpkin. Now with that creature introduced, I would love to make a second and a third and turn this into a bit of a franchise that takes the story and expands it, and brings it into different environments like neighborhoods or cities. Like you really
Okay.
really take this creature and take it to places and to continue every Halloween, this there'd be another card
Yeah.
movie that would come
Yep.
out that gives you that sort of like bonkers handmade. I'd always do it handmade. I don't care how difficult it is.
Yep.
I would always do it with puppets, but to make another one would be awesome. In
Nice.
my mind, it was always conceived as three. So
Okay.
we already have a whole sequel mapped out. The ending definitely winks to the idea of the story continuing. And at this point, it's so new. We don't know how I don't know where the everyone's mind's at. We have to wait and see how it performs, see if there's an
hmm
appetite for it, and then I would have to succeed in pitching a version that everyone's excited about doing again. But in my mind, this should be a whole franchise for sure. This
Oh
is an
yeah.
original
Yep.
monster that we've never seen before. This isn't a remake. This isn't like based on existing IPs. It's not a comic book. This is something that is a old throwback creature that is fresh and original. You
Yeah.
know,
Nah,
and
like
so
you said,
I would love to see it continue.
yeah, me too, because like you said, this is a throwback to like Tremors and everything. And Tremors has like so many films out, so and they just take it everywhere that they can. And so I would love to see this Killer Pumpkin, like you said, kind of go to different places. And so I think we can definitely see more than 3 films.
I mean, it was inspired by Tremors and Gremlins and Aliens and
Yeah.
Evil Dead. All of
Yeah.
those are a franchise. Even Thanksgiving, we're talking
hmm
about, gearing up for a second one now. Um,
Yeah.
this is the type of movie where I would love each installment to be a different experience. So if the first one is like a bonkers throwback to like Evil Dead, the second one I'd like to take a more Aliens approach and make it like an action slasher,
Yeah.
like more of
Yeah.
like an adventure, like a roller coaster. That's just because
hmm
like I said, we've established this thing. We know its backstory, we know its intentions and its motivation. Now we can play. So let's
hmm
let this creature off the leash and see where it wants to go.
Yeah. Because in my mind, I'm at the end of the movie. Spoiler alert, but when we seen the baby pumpkins, it reminded me of critters. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's like if we see something like that also.
critters. Yeah, 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 yeah. Ghoulies.
Yeah.
These old movies, these like B movies.
Yeah.
The Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, it'd be so fun to see it, continue.
Yeah. Now, can you share any info on any upcoming projects that you can tell listeners about, and where can they find you on social media?
On social media, you can find me on Instagram, Justin Harding _, just all one word. I'm also just recently got active on Twitter or X. I just started. I've been on
Mm,
there, but I've never really used it. But since the movie's come out, I've been scrolling through and like I'm
yeah.
actually on there interacting with people. That's how I found you. So
Okay.
I'm on there looking because I like seeing people's reaction to it. It's so interesting because it's all over the world. And
Yeah.
so I'm seeing reactions from so many countries, and it's like, how does this thing translate over the borders? It's fascinating. So I'm on Twitter. You can find me there. I think it's Harding _films. Instagram, Facebook. I'm on all those things. And in terms of upcoming projects, we just finished this thing, so we've mapped out a sequel idea. Cheryl and I, my co-writer, we've mapped out a sequel that we're working on. We also Thanksgiving 2 is coming up. I know right now the script's been put together. There's talks about that gearing up maybe in the spring. So I'm keeping that on my radar because I love working with Eli Roth. I love doing second unit directing. It's like the greatest side gig if you're a filmmaker to be able to do that with a world-class director. I'll move my schedule around to accommodate movies like that for someone like Eli, 100%.
Yeah.
Then there's two other movies that I'm looking to get off the ground. The scripts are both fantastic, and we're currently casting. One is they're not in this sort of genre. They're not in this sort of comedy horror genre. One is a gritty revenge thriller that has a fucking awesome script. The other one is more of a cosmic horror story, more of a supernatural story like The Shining or something, where it's a super scary existential horror that is very artistic and very, very, very scary, and I'm very excited about. So there's these, I'm looking to do these two other movies, both within the horror genre, but very different than Carved. Carved is its own unique thing that needed to be, under that comedy horror umbrella. But that's just Carved. There's two sides to my sensibility. I love comedy horror and gateway horror. I love Beetlejuice and Ghostbusters and Gremlins. Like I love it. I grew up loving those movies. I'm passionate about them. But also as a viewer and consumer of horror movies, I'm very, very much a fan of the darker horror films, psychological horror films. Talk to Me, Hereditary, The Babadook, The Shining, movies that are mean-spirited. I love mean-spirited movies. I love feeling like I'm in the hands of a dangerous filmmaker where you're gonna get hurt. It's not. It doesn't have a happy ending. And if you look at the TV shows that I've done with Eli Roth, Urban Legend, and The Haunted Museum, I did 6 episodes. Each one is a 45-minute horror film. They're all extremely dark in that direction. Psychological horror, mean-spirited. And so there's these two sort of facets to my personality or my sensibility as a filmmaker. And so Carved is one thing I really hope turns into a fun, kind of low-budget, bonkers franchise, but then also these other movies are different. They're flexing a different muscle. They're actually horror movies that are scary. Carved is not scary. Carved is funny and bonkers. But these movies are scary and gritty. And so yeah, that's what's coming up next.
Oh, that's cool. I can't wait to check out their next projects, man. So they're definitely on a list. Justin, thank you so much for coming on the show. For everybody listening, make sure you check out Carved. It's now streaming on Hulu. You don't want to miss this. We'll be back next week with another great episode. Until then, take it easy.
Game over. You